Hello everyone and welcome to the start of a brand new series. In this series we're going to go through the process of how to create a building system similar to games like Fortnite or any other crafting type game like Rust, where you can build forts and structures and things like that. But we're going to use it for building a sort of automation factory type game. So in this episode we're going to go through the process of actually the building task itself. Most notably the cursor. So how do we make the cursor work in a three-dimensional game inside our game here? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my first person blueprint. I'm in the first person template, by the way, here. And I'm going to clear a lot of junk in here that I don't need. So I'm not going to use any virtual reality stuff, so I can get rid of that. And I don't need the arms or the gun or the sphere, so I can get rid of those as well. Just need the camera. And when you do that, you'll need to clear the construction script. And on the event graph, we need to get rid of the spawn projectile. And the two boxes up here all relate to VR. So now I've hit compile. That should get a nice green tick. If you don't get a green tick, you just missed one of those boxes you have to delete. So make sure you got those things deleted correctly. Okay, so there's our first person character. So if we go into the game now and push play, you'll notice there's no arms or legs or anything like that. So this is what we want. Okay, so the idea is that we want to click a button and spawn a sort of hologram to where we're going to place an item and then place it. So we're going to go through that now. First thing we need to do is build that hologram type material and object. So we're going to do a material first of all, and we'll do a preview material. I call it preview mat. Open this up and I'll do a very basic thing here. So I'm just going to go and put in a 3 vector into my base color, and I'll make it a sort of greeny color like so. And then I'm going to go into my main node here and change its type from opaque to translucent. And I'm going to tick two-sided as well, and that will render the material on both sides of each polygon. Okay, so now we should start seeing something here. Okay, it's not too bad, but I'm going to turn down the opacity a little bit here. So I'm at opacity here, we're going to put in a scalar, so I'm just going to put in a constant value and plug that into the opacity, and we're going to put in 0.7. And that should give us a nice sort of see-through orb here. Yeah. Okay, that'll do. So let's just save that and return back to our thing. Okay, so now we've got the preview material. We need to actually make the objects we're going to build. So I'm just going to make a very simple block that I can place. So I'm going to go into blueprint class, actor, and we'll call this one a placeable block. And that's going to be a parent class that all our blocks will be using. So with that done, I'm going to right click on this and create a child, and this will be test block. Okay, so go into your placeable block, which is going to be the parent. And because it is a parent, the child will inherit anything we do on here. So I'm going to put in a static mesh as one of the components and leave it like that. Actually, no, let's click on that and change that to a cube. There we go. And it's going to be a 1 meter cube. We're going to work with meters for this series. And then we're going to go into the event graph. So here we're going to have some events here to determine when the block is being built or when it has been placed and things like that. So we're going to right click here and create a custom event, and we'll call placed. So when it is placed in the world there, and we'll have a begin play here as well. And the begin play, what we're going to do here is going to tell it to change that preview material. Okay, now what that means is as soon as this thing's created into the world, whilst the mouse is sort of hovering around, it's going to have that preview material, and when we place it, we're going to change that material back. So on the begin play here, we're going to drag out the static mesh component, and from there set material and we're going to choose our preview material from our options here. Now, that's all fine and good, but when we want to change it back, how do we know which material to send it back to? Well, before we do the set material, we need to actually store the current material that's on that mesh. So we've got a reference to it, and it has to happen before the set material. So from that same static mesh component, we can get from here and get material. And we can then store that return value as a variable, as a promote variable, and that will be default material, and we'll plug that in before the set material. So now we've got a reference to its original material before we change it to the preview material. Then when we're placing it, we then also want to turn it back. So very similarly, we're going to drag static mesh out, choose from there and get set material. And the material we want is that default material that we just stored, like so. Okay. Now another thing we can do also here is we can change the collision settings on this. So on a static mesh here, I'm going to drag it out, and when it's being like hologram mode, we're going to change it so it has no collision. Okay, so that way other players can still walk through it and things of that nature. So we're going to go into set collision enabled, and I'm going to tell it to have no collision. Then we're going to have that one also down here connected to the static mesh, and change that to collision enabled. So when it turns it on, it goes into collision enabled. By the way, whenever you see this happen, when we split it like this is totally fine to do like this. It's just a getter, so it's totally safe to do. This is exactly the same as having two of them, one doing each. Okay, that's exactly the same as doing that. It's just a lot less faffing about when you've just got one to worry about. Okay, so click compile and let's close out. So now if I drag this into the world and then hit play, we see that green material hologram looking, and I can walk through it. Okay, because it's not placed yet. Okay, so that's totally fine. That works. Okay, so that's that done. And because if we go to test block will have the exact same stuff, because I could drag this out, hit play, and there it is. Okay, doing the exact same thing. So that's how the child works. So what we're going to need to do is now work on the sort of the placement of this via the line tracing that's happening on the player character. So I'm going to go into my first person blueprint and go into the character. And in here, we need to determine whether or not we're trying to build something. So I need a variable, and we'll put in one called is building. This will be a boolean because it's going to be a true or false statement. If it's true, it means we're trying to build a piece, and if it's not true, it means we're just walking around like normal. So in here, I'm just going to do a tick event. Okay, and I'm going to drag is building out and choose get and put that into a branch. And all that's doing is saying only do this stuff if this is true. Okay, so we only write back this if it is actually trying to build something. So when it's doing this, we need to do a couple of things. First of all, we need to spawn the object that we're trying to place, and then we need to tell it where to place it. So I'm going to do a sequence on this. Okay, and on then 0, we're going to go up and do a do once, because we only want to spawn one of these items in the world at any one time. So do once is what we want. Once we get through there on the completed, we're going to do spawn actor from class, and the class we want, we can change this to a hard value here, but we're going to need to do it later anyway, so let's make it a variable. So on the variable list here, click new variable, and we'll do this one called current build piece, and that will be a placeable actor or block, and that'd be a class reference. So hover over it and you can see class reference. It'd be that purple one. And because it is purple, it matches this purple, and you can drag it on. The spawn transform doesn't really matter because we'll be changing it, but you need one on there. So we're just going to put in get actor transform. Okay. And then after that, we've got return value. So we need to store this as a value because we need to reference it later on. So on this return value, we're going to promote that to a variable, and we'll call this one build piece. Okay. So that's only going to happen once, okay, because it's on this do once here. The sequence then will go on to then 0, and then 1. And this is all happening within one tick. So in each tick, it's doing this check and going through all the sequence in one tick. So on then 1, we're going to come out of here, and we're going to do what we call a trace. Now, we're going to do a quite complicated trace, so what I'm going to do is going to make it its own function. So I'm going to go into functions, new function, and I'm going to call this one build trace. The build trace is going to consist of two types of line traces. The first one's going to go out from the camera, and the next one's going to handle its vertical location, because we only want it to build onto the ground or a surface. Don't want to build it in the middle of the air. So the first line trace can come out and do line trace by channel. And in fact, before that, what we're going to do is tell it which actors to ignore. So we need to tell it to ignore itself. So we don't want the placeable block to be hitting itself. Otherwise you get some weird issues appearing because of that. So that reference we got for build piece, we're going to drag this out, and then make that into an array. We're then going to store that array as a local variable. So promote to local variable. And local variable means this variable only exists inside this function, doesn't exist outside of it. And this one would be called ignored actors. So we've now got this ignored actors list. We can use that for this actors to ignore. So drag that into it like so. And now we've got to just put in the start and end location. So the start location is quite simply the camera. So drag your camera and get world location and plug that into your start. Next is the end. So the end position is going to be the world location plus a distance. So I'm going to get the world location plus vector, and that'd be your endpoint. Now the distance you're adding to this is going to come from the rotation of the camera. So that way it only places forwards in front of you. So from the camera, get forward vector. Then we're going to multiply that by a float. And that float is how far away maximum you want to place this thing. So I'm going to do 500. And then I'm going to add that to our world location here. And that will get plugged into the end location. So this is only doing a line trace out to find the distance away that you want to place it, okay? But this is not going to be the final location because we want to also check the vertical. We don't want it to place it in midair. We want to make sure it lands on the floor or the ground or something beneath it. So there's two outcomes to this. It either hits something or it doesn't. So we're either hovering the mouse cursor, so to speak, in the middle of the air or on the ground itself. So this return value here will tell us that. So we're going to put that into a branch. And the reason why this is important because we need to do two different line traces based on which condition this is. So let's do each of those line traces. So line trace by channel again. And we've got another one for the bottom here for false. So let's just drag that out a bit more, give us a bit more space. And then from the out hit from the first line trace, we're going to break that hit result to get all the data we need from it. So this is where things change because if it's true, and it means we hit the floor, we want the hit location to be the starting point or the end point, whichever way you want to go about this. Otherwise, in midair, we want to use the trace endpoint. So let's do the starting, the first one, the true. So this is hit with if we hit the floor. So location, we're going to make the endpoint, and then the location plus vector. We're going to plus in the Z 500. Now I know this from experience that we also need to add a little offset to the end here, because location could sort of hover above it sometimes, which isn't, you get some weird jittering issues. So I'm just going to location here and do minus vector, and in the Z, I'm just going to drop it down by 50. Okay, so that's negative 50 down in the Z. So it's going to go through the floor, basically. Okay, and actors to ignore, we've got that local variable. We're going to drag it into it like so. Okay, next we're going to do the bottom one. So this is line trace bar channel if we don't hit the floor. So this is if we're hovering the mouse in the midair. And if that's the case, we want to use the trace end instead. So trace end is going to be the start location. And then we're going to take away a vector. And we're going to take away 500 in the Z value. And that's it for that. We just need to put in the actors to ignore. Like so. So now we've got these two line traces. These are going to output a value, a location where we want to place something. So let's do a return node. And I'm going to split my out hit. So right click, split. Right click, split. And I'm just going to drag out my out hit location onto my return node to add it to that. And I'm going to copy and paste that down into the bottom one as well. Like so. And that's kind of it. So all I'm going to do here is change the draw debug type on the second wave of line traces to 1 frame. So I can actually test this out and make sure it is working correctly. Okay, so back to your event graph. On the event graph, on the then one sequence, we want to do that build trace. So drag build trace out from your function list, and there you have your work you just did. This is outputting a location vector, and this is the location we want to place our block. So we're going to drag build piece out, choose get, and then from there, we're going to set world location of the default scene route. Oh, sorry, not default, set world location, set actor location. My apologies. And that location is the out hit location. And that's kind of it. So if I hit compile, and I'm just going to turn is building on to true by default so you can see this working. If I hit play, we can see the line trace working there, but the block hasn't spawned, so let's check that. We've got an issue. That's because my current build piece here is empty. So if I change that to test block, compile, now let's test that out. And there's our test block. Okay, ready to go. And as you can see, I can hover mouse in midair and it'll snap it to the floor each time. And it works for blocks as well. Like so. Okay. So now, what if you want to snap it to a grid? So I want mine to snap to grid, sort of like how Fortnite does it. So all I'm going to do in there is at the end of my build trace, I'm going to drag out my out hit location, type in snap, and do snap to grid. Plug that in, and here you've got in grid size, and this is how far each grid piece is. So I'm going to do by meters, so that'd be 100 here. And now you'll see it snaps in 1 meter blocks. There we go. So all that's left is to do the trigger for where we left click and place it. So let's do that quickly and I need to go to my project settings, and I'm just going to change my input name. That makes a bit more sense. Action name, we'll do fire here, which is the left click button. I'm going to change that to confirm. No, we'll do click. We'll just do click. And then on the first person character here, when I do click, I want to get my build piece reference out and then call its placed function. And that is it. Okay, and that'll stop it. Change it. And once we've done that, we then want to turn is building off. And then we also want to change build piece here to set to nothing. And we then also want to call the reset of our do once here. So you can either make another event here, or we can drag this over like so. Now this could get quite complicated later on, so rather than doing that, what I'm going to do is make another event to this. So reset, we'll do a custom event, and we'll do this one, reset build. So at the end here, I can just call that reset build. And that's it. So hit compile, and it should now, when I left click, place the block. Perfect. And that's all there is really to it. Next, in the next episode, we're going to make it so that we can like put a bit more functionality behind this, so we can select an item from a list and choose it to place onto the floor. So not just placing the standard block here. So join us at the next episode right now over on patreon.com/Ryan Laley. People who are supporting me already, so thank you so much for all you supporters out there. This wouldn't be possible without you guys. Thank you again so much. If you donate just $1, you get access to the next part of this video, plus many other videos before anyone else, and it really goes towards helping me out massively in getting this channel to where I want it to be. So thank you again for all my current supporters. If you're watching this and you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the little notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my great content. We have live streams every single week, so don't forget to check those out. And thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you all in the next part. Bye bye.